to Raconteurs News.
This is Colin Johnson from East Coast Resistance, and you're listening to Raconteurs News.
Good evening and welcome to Thursday on Raconteurs News. My name's Andy Young, and I'm usually joined by Jason Holmes, my trusty sidekick, but tonight Jason's busy with family business, so tonight I'm joined for a nice change by Tony Hurst. Good evening, Tony.
Evening, Andy. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well. I'm enjoying this week. Just had a fantastic conversation this afternoon about an alleged speeding offence, and when I looked through the paperwork, there's a rather glaring, obvious mistake, which kind of works out pretty good for me, but more details of that as and when we've got that boxed off. Quite a roll this week with the guests. We had Jon Rappoport on Tuesday, and an hour with Jon is like 2 or 3 hours with most guys. He managed to squeeze in so much information. And tonight we're going to be joined by a fellow radio host, but he's over on American Freedom Radio, and that's a good friend of Raconteurs News, and he's on before this show. You just heard him talking to I can't remember the name.
Aphrodite Jones.
Aphrodite Jones, thank you, mate. It just gone out of my head there. It's disappeared off my screen. And I didn't manage to listen to that because the caller was on, but I caught the end of it, and it sounded a fascinating discussion. So, welcome back to Raconteurs News, Chuck Ochelli. Good evening.
Well, good evening, Andy. Good evening, Tony. Of course, it's always a pleasure to come on RN. I love Raconteurs News. You know, of the affiliates to the show, I got to say this. You guys absolutely do exactly what you say you're going to do. You don't give me a headache. And I love you guys for that. I'm going to tell you this right now, and I make this announcement publicly. Even if my show gets to a point where it's a huge entity, okay, and it's costing people money to run it and all that kind of good stuff, if that ever happens, you guys will still have it exactly as it is, free to you, exactly the way it goes. And I'm always going to be happy any time of day or night to show up and do a show with any of you guys. I love you guys over here. I just want to let you know that.
Yeah, great stuff, Chuck. That's a mutual feeling, that one, for sure. I think you're, well, one of the best out there. I said that to you, and I've said it to people here in our chat as well. You're someone to look up to. I don't really know what I'm doing here as an host, and compared to you, I'm a long way down, and I really enjoyed listening to your shows. I get to hear more of them now that we're broadcasting them, because obviously they go out live on American Freedom Radio. It's 1 a.m. here at the minute, but when the clocks go back, it'll be 2 a.m. So I didn't get to hear as many as I'd like to. So now, obviously, you can go to your podcast page as well, but I've had some cracking shows on here in the last couple of weeks. Been really enjoying it.
Yeah, I do appreciate it. Of course, the show yesterday with Aphrodite Jones was kind of interesting because she's a mainstream media person. I don't usually have them on my show. Yep. But she's coming at it from a different angle, and I don't think she's like the others, so that's why she made it there. Only 2 TV producers have ever been on my show, so her and John Barber, and that tells you something. You know, these are people that kind of changed the genre in which they were working and creating in. And, Aphrodite comes at it from a little bit of a different angle. I wouldn't necessarily agree with everything she said. Hey, look, I don't agree with everything anybody says. I don't follow anyone. But the fact is that, anytime I see somebody who's trying to produce something for a good purpose, I'm all for them. Unfortunately, she works for Investigation Discovery and does that TV show over there. But even she told you right there on my show, don't believe everything you see in the mainstream media because there is an agenda.
I was laughing at that one, actually, because when I was 15, I got myself into trouble and got myself incarcerated, if you like, and I come across in there a really awesome fella. He was a West Indian fella, and he was about 60. His name was Tom, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he was an absolutely amazingly intelligent fella. And he told me back then, don't believe anything that you see and only half of what you hear. And that's, the other way around. Don't believe anything what you hear and only half of what you see. and that stayed with me ever since. And at the time, I thought that was probably a bit too far-fetched or whatever, but now I've got older and wiser myself, he's pretty much spot on, I think, old Tom.
Oh, absolutely. And it's amazing what you can learn when you're incarcerated as a teenager. Didn't know you and I had that in common, Tony, but this is also one of the things that probably keeps us thinking in the same direction. You do learn quite a bit when you make those mistakes early in life. And, I recall a similar sort of speech given to me around that time, and didn't take it very seriously. But like you said, as we evolve, as we get a little older, we see things a little differently. So, hey, you know what? There's all sorts of ways to learn, and they're not all in your universities, okay?
Yeah, for sure, mate. Well, who was the other one? Roger Landry. I mean, he must have got himself a sore throat last Tuesday. I mean, that goes out on a Wednesday here. But the last couple of weeks, he's just been amazing. And he did bring up a film in the last show, which was Searching for Sugar Man, which when he mentioned it, it hit me straight away, because one of our regular listeners and contributors to Raconteurs News, Patrick, he actually came over to visit from Ireland earlier on in the year, and he recommended me to watch that film. And I'd put it in my watch list because I was really keen to watch it with my neighbour, who used to be a blues guitarist. Well, he still is a blues guitarist, just about. He's dying of cancer, and I wanted to watch that film with him, and I'd forgotten all about it until Roger mentioned it the other day. So that's a class one. I'll be checking that film out pretty soon, I think. So just little bits of information like that when they come along can really make a difference to an evening, or even your life, and on a good film.
All right. Well, I remember John Barber mentioning that film, actually. And he, this is the guy who created Real People on American television. I think it made its way around the world at one point or another. But also the guy who produced the Garrison tapes and is in the process of actually producing the second one. Now, this has to do, of course, with the prosecution of the only prosecution, in fact, of somebody connected to the John F. Kennedy assassination by a New Orleans district attorney. And it was amazing when John said this to me, because I didn't think that he would embrace a film like that, but it is really fascinating, and you got to let me know what you think of it after you watch it, Tony, because I think you'll find something really, really fascinating about, how things can carry on despite what the normal media mechanisms are, despite what the distribution mechanisms are. Sometimes the spirit of something quite a bit outgrows the initial entry into the electronic, the entry into the physical world. A song can often carry a sentiment, right? Thinking about, like, say, people like John Lennon and others who have created pieces of art that have carried on and are tunes in our heads today, regardless of whether we own them or anything else, that really do shape our perceptions. So I hope you do enjoy that film, and can't wait to talk to you about it, actually.
Yeah, that's great. I've just posted a link to it because you can see it on YouTube. I've posted that in the chat. Good evening to everyone in the chat. Sorry I've not said hello. If I type, it sounds like an elephant fruit on there, so I'll say hello to you here and welcome. But I'm really looking forward to that, and anyone can watch it in the chat there. So, and you was right as well. It was John Barber that mentioned the film. You've got a serious memory on you, Chuck. That interview you done was in September 2015, and you remembered who mentioned the film, but you didn't get a chance to get a word in on that interview. I was laughing all the way through it. And another amazing thing for me, right, because I've not been in this, if you like, this truth movement business for that long. And a couple of years back, when I was first exploring radio stations, probably 3 years ago now, I think it was on probably Truth Frequency Radio. I came across this show that I was listening to while I was working here on my own, right early hours of the morning, and there was this fella, and he was going on, and he was talking about this thing and then the other thing, and he was moving here, there, and everywhere, seemed to know everything about everything, and I was just totally blown away from it by him, and I never remembered what his name was, and couldn't think of it for I don't know, a few years, and I was speaking to Andy and one of our other members here, Ken. about this a few months ago, and they was trying to come up with names of who it possibly might have been that I listened to. And when you sent me that show the other day, and I put that on and I was listening to it, I was straight away, I was thinking, oh my God, this is the fella. This is the man I've been looking for 3 years. Awesome.
Well, right, and he was a television producer and also acted in television shows and things like that. He was a stand-up comedian at one point in his life. Interesting guy, actually Canadian, Jon Barber. He lives in America now, but his entire career was destroyed, effectively when he tried to tell the truth about the Kennedy assassination, all right, on national television. That's what happened. And this guy is one of my heroes, to be honest with you. So he's been on my show, I think 5 or 6 times, and it's been an incredible pleasure to run across people. Like I said, when I selected another guy who worked in television that I really wanted to have on, that was a producer, a personality that had done interviews. If you go to Jon Barber's World, by the way, on the internet, you can take a look at his history. I'm not here to do a commercial for him, but I'm telling you right now that when we consider what media has been, what it is today, I look at what Jon Barber was, and even when I was a kid, I understood that based on his work, I could imagine what the media could become. So I would say that he's definitely one of my influences personally, that allows me to have a template. Not necessarily that I'm following his pattern in any way, shape, or form, but a template to imagine the possibilities. And after all, isn't that what we're all doing here?
Yep, it sure is. I really enjoyed him, and I recommend people go and check that show out. You can get it on Ochelli.com. Go to the RSS feeds, archives on the right, and 2015, September, I think it was, last one.
I believe you're right there. There's been many times he's been on, but it's, again, like I say, it's one of the people that I've had the tremendous luck to be able to bring out and actually expose to a whole new audience, because a lot of people didn't know his name, didn't know he was the guy who produced that movie, didn't know a lot of things about this guy, I would say, in current in current media speak, et cetera, but definitely somebody that you should look at if you want to understand how when you produce something that is meaningful, regardless of what your sentiment is, exactly how the corporate media can turn around and crush you effectively. This is exactly the guy to look at. So anyway, now that we've done all of that, and we've talked about the past, and we've talked about the media, and I've definitely said that I am so grateful that you guys have me on here and everything else, where do we want to go for the listeners? Right? What do you think, Andy? Because we haven't even heard from you in like 15 minutes. You still there?
Yeah. I'm just sitting back and listening and trying to learn something, Chuck. You've been in this game a lot longer than me and Tony, and as Tony was saying earlier, great admirer of what you do there, and you put out some really great content. So really, I suppose the best way to start would be to ask you what's been on your radar this last week or couple of weeks, and what's really getting under your skin at the moment, Chuck.
Well, look, day by day we have new things, right? What am I looking at? Okay, I'm going to tell you right now. I have part of my research open, which I do every single day before I do a show. I take a look at the world around us. I try and examine what's happening, and I never catch it all at all. But you know what? I take a look at every single kind of news source I can get my hands on, and look, I don't necessarily, like I say, catch everything. But it is amazing to just take a look at some of the headlines, right? We have this whole thing going on, obviously, in the streets of America, which is still going on, even though it seems like the MSM has moved forward a bit. We have making a killing, right? 1.2 billion in Euro arms pipeline to Middle East. Of course, that's going on, right? Just dashing around the headlines a little bit. Mass killings may have created contagion. right? This is now going to be seen, violence as a disease. I almost want to agree with this stuff, but when you start to dissect what it is they intend to do with the agenda, it becomes something else, okay? Let's see. An expert calls for terror attacks to be treated the same way as suicide when it comes to media coverage. Fascinating stuff. Okay, French media says they'll no longer use terrorist photos to avoid glorification. Interesting. Another interesting headline is Europe burning, events propelling Trump into the White House. Oh, my. And then we get into all that wonderful stagecraft, which I did talk about. You probably guys aired it on Wednesday, because I did a Tuesday night show with Roger Landry and JP Satilli. Roger, we talked about vaccines, but with JP, we had to discuss the two, conventions here and go over what all that meant and what kind of nonsense was really happening. So what do we see? Okay. There's the surface of that regarding the DNC, which is the Democratic National Convention here in America. That's the Hitlery, Schillery side of things. That's who that is. Okay, fine and dandy. And who even cares who our vice presidential candidate is? Because we already know that the selection process is fully rigged. But there is all this speculation regarding what happened to Bernie Sanders. Now, when you take a look at what the news media is reporting, including the alternative media, by the way, this is a non-story, et cetera, et cetera. But here's the funny part. There's a lot of these people that were Sanders supporters that are claiming to be silenced directly, even reports of cell phones being jammed. Interesting that a presidential candidate has the wherewithal to utilize that kind of technology, while conducting their little convention. Not saying that it's an absolute provable fact, but what I'm saying is that's being reported from multiple individuals, and nobody's talking about it. Thank you very much. And that includes our friends in the alleged alternative media. Okay, anyway. Let's get back to it. Let's see. The Democrats are looking at, the emails. Did the Russians hack it? Is Trump in collusion with the Russians? That's a lot of speculation right now. Is Putin really putting his muscle behind Trump? Blah, blah, blah. All part of the grand distraction, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. What else do we have going on? Well, let's see. Internationally, Merkel vows to continue accepting war refugees, right? This is a headline from today. German special forces raid a mosque. Okay, so Germany's back on the map as far as the alleged global war on terror. Let's see. In Turkey, they're shutting down lots of media outlets. Okay, IDF soldiers are allegedly shooting Palestinians against orders. Just the world the way it's supposed to be, right? Netanyahu wants to make deals on the U.S. aid packages. All right, fine. What are we doing domestically? Nobody's really talking about too much of that because, after all, we have to go back into the streets and deal with the Black Lives Matter, the White Lives Matter, the Blue Lives Matter, and all of that stuff. When people keep forgetting that, as things stand right now, it really should read No Lives Matter, because that's how the system has decided to, posture itself at the moment. But if we want to turn it around, we can at any time, and we can make it so that all lives matter. And I don't care what color you are. I don't care who you think you are. I don't care what language you speak. How about all of our lives actually matter if we begin to work together and deal with things on a human level, as opposed to constantly begging the system to stop beating us? It's very much like the battered spouse syndrome. No matter how many times you beg the abusive husband or wife, by the way, which is an underreported thing, as I discussed last night, but no matter how many times you beg the abusive spouse to stop beating on you, it does not mean that your cries are going to be heard. If you still allow them to have all of the power, if you still allow them to have all of the leverage over you, and then you ask them to stop abusing you, the grand question comes up: why even bother to acknowledge your plea? And that's the condition we find ourselves in. Is anybody talking about that? Is anybody talking about how many people are getting swallowed up by the system, who are being literally crushed financially by the elusive, illusionary monetary system? No. Let's not discuss that, because after all, we've got plenty of hot button issues out there, and we can discuss how transgendered people, don't have a bathroom, even though they're less than 1% of the population. We should definitely pay attention to that sort of thing. And meanwhile, is it done on purpose that, Trump's wife goes out there in an accent and says exactly the same thing that Michael or Michelle or whoever Obama's spouse is actually out there saying whatever they're saying? Is it the same words? Is it the same game? It absolutely is. And it's all nothing but a bunch of weapons of mass distraction. So maybe I have to cover those things from time to time to just pull away the veil and say to you guys, you know what? The reality is that unless we begin to matter to ourselves and unless we begin to stare in the mirror, we're not going to seek the individual who is responsible for the solution. So there we go. That's how I would sort of capsulize the world today, just off of the headlines. And there's a lot more, of course. But I turn it back over to you guys and take it in any direction you like.
I'd agree with your analysis there. Pretty much spot on. But that's why I like listening to your shows. So I agree with your points of view. So awesome. I don't know where we're going from here.
I have that effect on people.
Yeah, you do. There's so much it fries my brain, right? It don't function at the speed that it needs to keep up with you.
Well, I talk fast, but I'm really just trying to let my mind my mouth catch up to my mind. And it's not me. It's the world around us, right? Everything in real time being fed out there via the live stream, et cetera, et cetera. But, I always say, and I point back to this constantly, there was this great song by Gil Scott-Heron years ago, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." Well, okay, the supremacy of television is not quite what it used to be. And that's a good thing, that's for sure. But remember, the revolution will not be live streamed. It will not be brought to you by Facebook. It cannot be brought to you by Twitter either. It is not something that you're going to see broadcast live with commercials or, sponsors' cards inserted over the video. What's going to happen is the revolution is within. It is within us. It is within our control. And all we have to do, truthfully, is reacquire the power which we have over the past few generations absolutely laid down and given over to the corporatist structure, okay, to Global Corp. We need to just simply retake our position in the power structure, because this is our world. We outnumber those of us who are in the majority here. We outnumber everyone. Any other group. Yeah, go ahead.
Tiny dots in it. What's his name? I can't think of his name. Larkin Rose, Tiny Dots video. It's class 1 for explaining that on YouTube, about the power, the numbers, and how few there is, and how we just accept it all. You know that video?
I don't know the video, to be honest with you, but Larkin Rose is somebody I've talked to off the air and haven't had on air yet.
Okay. Does he not do interviews then? Because he does seem to know his stuff, doesn't he?
Oh, no, he does interviews now and then. It's just that there was, different, like for instance, I've never had, there's a few people that I've talked to off the air that I've not had on the show. Sometimes it's for scheduling concerns or whatever, because I insist on doing my show live. I don't pre-record. I have pre-recorded a couple, but I don't like doing it. I like working without a net. There's no editing. There's no approval of it. It just is what it is. We present the honest conversation. And honestly, sometimes people are not prepared to do that with me because I don't give them a script. I don't warn them of things very much ahead of time. I mean, I may have a 10-minute conversation with somebody before I do a 2-hour discussion, and I've just met them. I do it based on my point of view. And really, my show's never about me anyway. It's always about the guest. But some people are not prepared to do that. There was one instance where I allowed a scripted show to go on, and I will never, ever do it again. And that was with one of these guys from Architects and Engineers from 9/11. And to be honest with you, I am now suspect of that entire organization as I watch their behavior. And it's sad to say, because I thought they had presented some good information regarding this.
Yeah, I did hear you talking to someone on one of your shows in the last few weeks, actually, about that, and I was quite surprised about all that. But it sounds like you know what you're talking about there, and you've got into that. So, yeah, I was quite surprised about all that.
Well, Tony, look, when we go on to talk on a show, or when someone who is knowledgeable on a topic goes on to discuss things on a show, generally speaking, we know that there's going to be things that are going to come up that we are not necessarily right away prepared for. Sure, there's a script, you want to get out your plug, you want to push your book, you want to push your film, whatever it may be. That's fine. But at the same time, this is not a scripted interview. It's not, here's what's going to happen and here's what's going to happen, and that's all there is to it. Not what you get on the television streams, not what you get on NPR or any of the other radio outlets where, there's a standardized set of answers and questions. Okay? We may have some questions. We may even be prepared. I actually almost never have any paper notes at all, and usually do my shows with my eyes closed, to be honest with you, because I'm imagining that the only thing that's going to be input to the listener is what they're hearing. So I don't give too much of a visual to it. That may change in the future, but this is the way that my show works. And to be honest with you, it didn't feel right to have somebody hand me a script, which is exactly what Richard Gage did. And I could not deviate from it. And another time when I had him on a show, for a 9/11 anniversary, where I wanted him to drop in for 10 minutes, which is all that they would grant me, 10 minutes, and talk about the fact that they were handing out pamphlets in New York. He agreed to come on the show. I had gone through the gauntlet of secretaries and everything else that he has around him, arranging this stuff. And quite honestly, he showed up and then disappeared because he didn't even want to be on a show where someone would speculate. So you mean to tell me that you have this great grasp of what it is you're presenting, but you can't even face the smallest bit of speculation from somebody who's uneducated, despite the fact that you're a master architect and you have a higher education, and I'll tell you a lot of other little behaviors that I really won't talk about publicly yet, that I've seen out of architects and engineers, really makes me feel like they may be part of the gatekeeping structure where we're not allowed to go further. We're not supposed to talk about the possibilities and the pieces of evidence that don't necessarily fit their particular story arc. And what does that say? I know it's not a popular position, but what does that say to you guys?
It says to me, Chuck, that if someone's not prepared to field questions, then they've really got something to hide, and they're certainly particularly wary of certain types of questions. We've had a similar thing with guests wanting to record interviews, and by and large we're the same. We don't do that because I think the whole live thing, like you say, is something a bit different to what you get in the mainstream, and if we start following their modus operandi, we're going to be in danger of being as lazy and self-serving as they are. So we try and do it live, and we have actually, Jason and I have got a week off after tonight, so we will be recording a show Saturday night, which will go out on Tuesday while we're away, I think. And then we were going to put another replayed show out on Thursday, but I believe Tony's going to jump in and perhaps do a show in place of that. But we have got the beauty of live radio. We have got a question from Joan in the chat room. Good evening, Joan. And she'd like to know, has Chuck heard of Jill Stein? She talks a lot of sense for a politician. New word that Joan's invented. I like that one there.
No, I definitely like that word. Again, I come at it from a very skeptical angle. I've seen some of the statements of Jill Stein, and I agree with Joan that there's some interesting things coming out of her mouth. But I caution anybody who is looking at any of these people that has dealt in the political game, you got to be very careful. I even had Roger Stone on my show, some months back, and he was supposed to come back, by the way, but that's a whole other issue. Roger Stone is an interesting character. He has often spoken some truth in the media. Okay, some very inconvenient and ugly truth, but this is also the guy who's been part of the, the grand political manipulation, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on what angle you look at this guy, you either think of him as a political hatchet man who dates all the way back to the Nixon administration, also had something to do with the election of a guy named Ronald Reagan, had something to do with the grand election of George H.W. Bush, through the Willie Horton ads, all that wonderful stuff in America. But at the same time, nowadays is being embraced in some circles in alternative media, most namely Mr. Panic Attack Jones. You guys know who I'm talking about. Thing is, this guy is a devious character, and I approach any of these people with caution. Although Jill has said some interesting things recently, and it does seem as though we may have more to dig into regarding the process. We may be able to expose exactly how it's being manipulated a little more, and the Sanders campaign may have done us a greater favor here than we realize at the moment. But here's the funny part. I think that even if I brought the absolute smoking gun to people in America and was able to have access to even the corporate media, I think if I had access to that, if I had access to everybody's show all across the map, and I brought them absolute proof that their votes don't matter, that really this is a preordained, completely manipulated, selected process, and your rulers have already been chosen for you. If I did that with absolute certainty with the individuals, even if I brought on former presidents to say, yeah, I was told 10 years before I was president that I was meant to be elected, I guarantee you that automatically half of the American public would not even pay attention anyway. So it's a strange thing, but Jill is somebody that has caught my attention too. So, kudos to Joan on that, and also for that term, the politician. I love that.
You never know, Chuck. You might get lucky. America might turn out to have a short spell of democracy back, just like we apparently did in Europe, according to so many with the Brexit vote. So you never know. You might get it back for a night or two.
Hey, look, anything is possible in the atmosphere we have. But see, and that's another thing is in America, the Brexit thing, and I had you guys on my show to discuss it, right? And explaining to people that this is still not something that was legally binding, and that this is not, the American public thought that the moment that there was a vote, in the House of Lords or Parliament or whatever, that the moment that happened, that means that is the way of things now. And it isn't. It wasn't, and it never is, Just like when our Congress allegedly agrees to do something, which is almost rare now. I mean, we have some of the most do-nothing lawmakers you've ever seen, unless they want to pass a piece of legislation that, when printed onto paper, is about as tall as you or I, Tony. Unless they want to do that, which is loaded with all sorts of language meant to do many things that nobody's ever meant to understand in the public at all. Unless it's something like that, I mean, our alleged lawmakers, our alleged representatives, don't represent us and don't really care about what it is we have to say. They are after their fundraisers. They are after their retirement funds. They are after their obligations to their corporate paymasters. And I have a funny feeling that Great Britain, the UK, whatever it is you want to say, is exactly the same way. Because where did we learn this corruption from? Gee, I wonder. And I still contend that it is questionable as to whether we actually won the Revolutionary War or not. But anyway, sorry, Tony. I gotta go there once in a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I've seen and read and heard a lot of people talking about that and saying that it was never a done deal, all that revolution business, that you was never ever separated, that it was just an illusion. But I wouldn't know for sure. I don't really know much of it, but sure, I ain't lived long enough to read all the books that a lot of people seem to get through on all these different subjects. So you've got Joan was saying there about what was her name again, the woman you was talking about, Jill Stein. She was saying that the NLP is obvious with Jill Stein. I don't know. I've not seen her. I wouldn't know myself. But is there a lot of that NLP business going on over there in your politics? I take it there is.
Well, define for me, just so I'm sure, what NLP means.
Neural linguistic programming.
Okay. Just wanted to be sure. See, I ask instead of just assuming that an abbreviation means what I think it means.
Yes, with a channel between us, it might mean something different. Many things are different, aren't they? So I should have spelled that out.
Yeah, well, no problem. I just wanted to clarify for me. It's not your fault at all. But look, of course, that's exactly. Look, it's sentimentality over substance. It's absolutely irrationality over integrity. There is, it's really a grand circus, and not a circus in terms of, I often compare it to the one with the clowns and the elephants and all that good stuff, but it's really a grand circus in the most ancient sense. This is, a religion essentially that is very temporarily seized upon. People think that these individuals are going to be their saviors when absolutely they have no obligation to us anyway, as we the people. So the neurolinguistic programming, sure, that is something that is constantly thrust upon us in order to control. It's it's part of the control mechanism. So sure, that's dominant anywhere in the English-speaking world that I've encountered, even if it is somewhat American English. I'll tell you another thing. Apparently, there was a question in the chat room that was passed here to me. I'm not looking at the chat room, but you guys are. Do I have Alex Jones's voice coach? Okay. No problem, because in Australia, by the way, I hear from Australians all the time that think I sound like Alex Jones, and it's not intentional, folks. Fact is that I used to be a singer. I had this kind of buzz in my voice and all that. Naturally, when I sang, when I spoke, it was a lot smoother. But here's two things that interceded and created the noise you hear. It's got nothing to do with a voice coach. One thing is I had a surgery some years ago on my throat for sleep apnea, and they removed, my tonsils, part of the soft palate, reconstructed the inside of a bunch of things, and it changed the sound of my voice. That's number one. The second thing is that at a certain point, somebody attempted to cut my throat and nicked part of the windpipe and part of the apparatus in there when they were trying to do that, and that particular scar has also lent itself to that grisly kind of raspy sound that you hear. So it's not voice coaching, it's not an attempt to mimic Alex Jones, it's just what I am stuck with. Just so you know. Okay.
Wow, your throat's gone through some serious harm, innit?
Well, look, just like all of us, we're all in the trauma-based programming, era of reality here, right? I think of September 11th, 2001 as the singular PTSD event for all of the American people, for sure. I'm sure it had some sort of earth-shaking qualities to it worldwide, but definitely we live in the post-traumatic era. Okay, and this is where we are. And I did say error on purpose. We live in the post-traumatic era where we have allowed ourselves to be controlled by fear. And, hey, it is what it is. So, yeah, I've been through a few things. It doesn't matter at this point in time. But I just wanted to let people know that it's not an attempt to sound like that guy. Although, I am getting a little afraid because as I look at myself on video recently, I realize my head's getting bigger. So, I feel bad because, you want to talk about a guy with a beefy head and a raspy voice who's doing alleged alternative media. Yeah, I know what the comparison's about. And you know what? Here's the last part of that I'm gonna speak to. I'm very sorry if you're reminded by Mr. Anxiety, Panic Attack, Alex Jones. Okay.
I think it's pretty easy to tell the difference, right? The main way is that you talk sense, and the second way is there's none of that hysteria and fucking fear-mongering going on. Like, yeah?
Well, I'm not screaming at you, and I'm not selling you male vitality pills. So, big differences there.
yeah, it's pretty easy to tell the difference. But I think
and if you notice, Tony, I never really scream at people. Even when I'm not happy with what they're saying on my show, I don't, go into a hysteria, where I say, "Oh, well, you're obviously on the side of the other." I don't participate in that nonsense. So you've listened to me plenty of times. You know that this is not my business to do this. As a matter of fact, I am always about saying, you know what, no matter how horrible you think things are, no matter how bad you think something is, and rest assured, there is plenty of terrible, ugly, horrible things in the world. But there is always a way for you who is listening to me to do something to change the equation. And that is something that you don't get from info whores. Okay? Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's something we like to do on Raconteurs News as much as we possibly can. We get as many people as we can to come on and talk to us about how they're challenging the system and how they're making a difference, and particularly people who've had victories against the system. Although it does seem as the victories progress, there's always an attempt to shut them down or to change the law so that these, air quotes, loopholes can't be exploited. Mm-hmm. But, we're going to try and keep bringing as many guests who are challenging in the courts, and like the guy I was talking to today on speeding tickets, just incredible information. It's a bit of a sensitive stage at the moment, so I don't want to discuss any of what we talked about, because he said some of it needs to be kept back for a little while, keep our powder dry and move forward. But he's helped thousands of people to return those speeding tickets and face no further action. So those are the sort of people we try and bring on board. The people who are challenging the child stealing by the state, the people who are challenging the mortgage fraud, the banking fraud, and anything else we can get where people are making a difference against the system, rather than saying, oh, my God, it's such a mess, we're all screwed, because that doesn't help anybody at all, does it?
Yeah, exactly. That's another reason why I love you guys, because you do exactly that. I do tune into some of these shows where I hear people talking about how they've actually achieved something. And, for those out there who think, well, look, I don't have a court case, or maybe I don't have the wherewithal, or I've never owned a house, so I haven't been involved in these battles, or even if you don't have children, which, by the way, all of the problems you just listed are international. This is the kind of thing that's going on here in this country. Nobody's talking about the grand construct of Child Protective Services. It takes on many names in many different states in this country, but the agenda is all the same. They're interfering in people's abilities to raise their own children, so on and so forth. And that entire system, in fact, is something that I'm going to have to address very shortly. Little inside baseball inside baseball is what we might call it in America, but a little inside information here. Actually, I'm in the process of dealing with something where I'm waiting for, I've already been told that I should not comment on it until the courts are done with it. But believe me, there will be more to be heard, and I'm going to talk to my personal situation on my show very shortly regarding this issue. But back to it, as I said, these problems do prevail all over the world. It is because of the international corporate structure. Okay, so don't think that anybody's special. But here's the thing. I want to say, and I always like to say this, and maybe I don't say it enough. Changing and challenging the system can be one of these great victories. It can be one of these great demonstrations, that's for sure. But there are many, many ways in which you can do it. A simple act of kindness to your neighbor, someone that you help out in one way or another, somebody whose life you maybe make a little bit easier just by listening to them. These kinds of things, it sounds all kinds of highly falutin in a philosophical way and everything else, but it's not. it really does change the world around you. You don't know what you may accomplish by a simple act of kindness. And this is the kind of thing that really frightens the system. If we begin to take care of one another and be decent to one another, I encourage that as a constant. And I hope that anybody who's listening to Raconteurs News absolutely thinks the same way, that this is a perfectly appropriate and proper way of challenging the system as well, is by not participating in the divide and conquer, the us and them. There's definitely an us and them, but the them is a very small percentage of individuals who control certain facilities that they have led us to believe are absolutely necessary in our life. They are not those who actually control our lives, our actions. And every moment that you are alive, you have a choice. You have a choice to do something, to say something, and to be something. And that cannot be taken away from you as of yet. They don't have full control over your will and your desire to change your world around you. And if we all did that just a little bit each day, I guarantee you that the stranglehold that a lot of people see and that we do experience from time to time would no longer be as tight as it is, and would not be as it is if we each took that responsibility alone. And it doesn't cost you a dime. It can cost you a dime. Listen, there's nothing wrong with sharing whatever it is you may have, and I believe in that as well. And here I go, sounding like a hippie, right? Again, you're going to tell me Alex Jones is going to tell you this? No. Right.
Yeah,
but I really believe that. I really believe that. And you guys, maybe you disagree with me, but I believe that, and I think that is the way that anyone and everyone can participate in reshaping the world around us, by taking the smallest of actions all the way on up to the largest grand action that they wish.
No, I agree with you. We are the problem, we are the solution, and we all need to be the change we want to see, don't we?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we do encourage that quite a bit on here. There's a lot of people walking the walk, but as you well know, and so do most of the people in the chat anyway, they know that fear is what stops a lot of people stepping outside of their boxes and withdrawing from the systems. And it's often not easy as well, and we've become lazier and lazier by design, and kind of anything that takes writing a letter or really actually doing something nowadays, it just seems to have got harder and harder for people. But the adversity seems to wake them up in their droves. It's what woke me up, and many of the people I know. And this is why I've been saying for a while now that maybe it needs to get worse before it can get better, because we need to wake enough people up. And if adversity for themselves is anything that's going to point them in the right direction, then maybe logic says that we have to get worse before it can get better. I hope not, but it might be the way it is.
Well, it's definitely not on your wish list for things to get worse before they get better. But,
No.
We are here all together, and we don't have another choice. There's not another planet to go to. So this is a collective experience. And, I see no reason not to participate, like I said, again, in any way that you can. Whatever it is you can do to counteract the agenda that's been thrust upon us, and that agenda really does boil down to fear, Tony. I love talking about this with you. I've talked about this with you before, and it is the greatest enemy. The guy who said in America, I know this is an overused line, but the guy who said in America, and I won't even point you to it, but you guys know who I'm talking about, who said that fear, there is nothing to fear but fear itself, was telling you something that is absolutely universal, is not, again, we don't have a patent on it here in America. We don't have a patent on tyranny, nor do we have a patent on freedom. I love that statement. This is not our exclusive. We don't have a monopoly here. And I remind people of that all the time. These are worldwide concerns, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and we're all here for the same purposes, and that is to live our lives. And don't forget to do that either. While you're dealing with the struggles and you can see the things that are arrayed against you, look, take every step you can to make yourself, the people you care about, the people around you, as healthy as possible, psychologically, physically, with the food. Remember, your food is your medicine in almost every case. All right. And, the thing is, do take every step you can to, like you said, be the change that you want to see. And you'll be surprised how much of an influence you as an individual who maybe only has a few friends, a small family, or maybe just one friend. You don't know what you start when you just inspire something. And you can inspire it by your own actions. You can inspire it by the information you share and the care that you take in trying to inform, and also and also be kind. Again, kindness. Kindness is not a weakness. Okay, so I don't know how many different ways to say that, but Andy, you want to disagree with me at all?
No, absolutely not, Chuck. I don't want to disagree on that, because that's something I've talked about for quite a time myself. I see so many people who are doing selfless acts to help all kinds of people and expecting nothing in return. And I see so many times, which was kind of infuriating, those people get a slap in the face from the very same people that they're trying to help. And people say to me, "Oh, well, I'm just trying to help people." Well, unfortunately, there are a group of people, and they're not a group that I like to associate with, but they're a group of people who associate kindness with weakness, and they see any weakness to be as something to be exploited to gain an advantage. So while you're trying to help those kind of people, unfortunately, it ain't going to go very well for you. But I think if you can just be a little bit more discerning about who you team up with and who you try and help, it can go a long way to making things a lot smoother.
That's true. That's true. I mean, obviously, use some discernment. I'm not saying fully. Look. If you take the time to, simply approach somebody on the street that you see is in distress, and you simply ask them, are they okay? And you listen to them for a bit, there's nothing ventured there that can be lost. You've done a good thing, and that's that, regardless of their reaction. And remember that people have been so conditioned to a victim mentality that they don't understand. They can't reconcile kindness. So they act in an inappropriate fashion. Okay, this happens, and we know this. We've seen it over and over again, that people just show no appreciation, and in fact react in exactly the opposite way that you would think they would to simple acts of kindness. That happens. So yes, be selective, right? But at the same time, there's got to be a way to reach those people as well. And I think actually with your being selective is a good point here. I'm glad you brought that up. If you're selectively causing a good thing to happen with people that will take that and utilize it and maybe even pass it on themselves, eventually even those who don't know how to behave correctly, who have been conditioned to take kindness as weakness and to believe that they should basically punish those who do a good thing, no good deed goes unpunished, that kind of thing. Eventually, I think even they would come into the fold, to be honest.
Reprogram them, with different behaviour to what they're used to, innit? See what behaviour rewards and what behaviour don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, and nothing happens overnight. We did not get into the situation we got into overnight. So, you're not going to go out and feed some homeless people and the world's going to change instantaneously. But you never know what you might have done, by keeping somebody alive one more day, and even those people who will turn around and slap you in the face for doing it. Remember that some of them are connected to others too. And even though they don't know how to react correctly, perhaps you're teaching their child something. Perhaps you're teaching a person who's around them something. It's not always obvious, the results of your actions, but always consider them. And I say I would rather make the error on the side of participating in love as opposed to fear, participating in kindness as opposed to aggression. I would always, I know I can sleep better at night knowing that I made the mistake of being too kind, of making the effort to uplift someone. You can't save every drowning person because some of them will fight you. That's true. But the fact is that I can sleep a lot better at night knowing that I did my part. And I think that's the overall attitude to take from it. Of course, you don't let somebody, again, I got trained as a lifeguard at one point in my life too. You don't try to save somebody who's going to drag you down with them. That's 2 drowned people as opposed to 1. And you don't do that. That's for sure. But at the same time, you make that effort, and you never know what you might accomplish by even, saving those who are a little bit resistant, etc., or those who are not appreciative. There's a resonant effect. There is the butterfly effect for real. It's not all negative. It's not all positive. And the truth is that if we change the direction of the wind with that flapping of the butterfly's wings sometimes, eventually that can become a destructive force that will wipe away the things that need to be destroyed as well. So, I think of it in both directions. Every tool seems to cut both ways in my estimation. And, again, I would rather make the mistake of being on the side of doing the right thing, of giving to someone as opposed to taking from them. And you never know the lesson that might be taught, even by someone who observes it, who has nothing to do with it, who maybe takes that in. And you might change their mind a bit. I consider even my own personal life having been changed by a couple of acts of kindness early on. Otherwise, I would have taken a different trajectory, I believe. And you never know what that might result in when you do it. So I don't want to discourage it, but you're right. You should be intelligent about it. And you should be intelligent about all your choices. Intelligent and willful in that you are making sure that your actions carry the truth of your sentiment. Like Tony was saying, be the change that you want to see. That's a little bit of a deeper statement. That's not a slogan. If you think about it, because this is exactly how things get changed, is by the action. And I just say that, the smallest action to the largest action. And sure, if you can demonstrate to the world that there is a way to fight the system directly and through their own, venues, etc., do that as well. And I always encourage those kind of people to come on and tell me how that works as well, because I'm always in the process of learning. And, hey, you know what? I may learn that I'm incorrect even about some of the things I've talked about today. But as it stands, I'm always willing to learn. And I still do believe that making the error on the side of refusing to embrace fear, refusing to be dictated to, refusing to be cruel, refusing to seek to dominate others is something that is it's just incumbent upon me as a human being. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do things the right way if we want to see things go the right way in the world around us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chuck. We've got a comment on what you just said there from Rob Freeman, and he says, brilliant. The management of fear and the expression of love will win this game. And Mithrin is adding a question in there, which will take us up to the break, Chuck. And he says, does Chuck agree that the people of America have the best chance of reforming the system?
That is a tough question. I see now it could be my own prejudice because I'm here. It seems as though some of the most intense weaponry has been trained upon the United States, to be quite honest with you. It seems as though, numerically, we are the most vaccinated. We are the most GMO'd. We are the most chemtrailed, and I don't give a damn if you think that's a real thing or not. We are the most chemtrailed. We are the most GMO'd. We are the most vaccinated. We are the most cognitively manipulated people on the planet, the way I see it. Okay, so we are absolutely in the crosshairs. I think it's for a reason. I think it's because there is just enough wiggle room in the system. There is just enough sentimentality built into the American mindset that we could, if incited correctly, be the vanguard of worldwide change. I really do think that that's a possibility. I don't know how much faith I have in that. It changes on a daily basis because, quite honestly, there are a lot of people that are very much lost. They have tuned out and they refuse to look at the reality around them. They just want to be left alone. They just want to be allowed to survive. They just want, they're just waiting for their houses to be worth money again. They're just waiting for somebody to hand them a way out of their debt. They're just trying to survive long enough so that they can die in peace. And that is really the majority of people in this country. There is a small minority here that could get very loud, could get very vocal, could get very active, and could be a very serious problem worldwide, not just because we have guns, because we are outgunned by the technology at this point. I mean, if you think your shotgun in America is going to save you from a drone strike, good luck. But we're also some of the most innovative people on the planet, in my estimation, or at least we used to be. We've also been very much systematically dumbed down, though. We've also been systematically fluoridated. We've been systematically, even in the baby formula, they utilize aluminum here, as an anti-clumping agent. We are purposely kept dumb. We are purposely kept sick. We are purposely kept busy, so that we never have the chance to really examine who the real enemy is. And on top of it, the divide and conquer strategy is working. However, do we have the potential to be the world leaders once again, to not just be the exporters of the military-industrial complex, to not just be the American empire that has a presence in over 160 nations at this point, militarily, out of the, 190 that actually exist, depending on, which government has been overthrown this day or that day across the planet? Do we have the potential to be a hell of a lot more than that? Yes, we do. Do I have the faith in what I see in my fellow citizens, my fellow people? Forget citizens. I don't want to get into that discussion. Do I have a faith in my fellow man that I can observe, that I can lay my eyes on around this country? It's questionable. Is it possible? Yes. Is there a strong minority? Is it growing? Is there an awareness that's growing? Not awake. I hate awake as a term, because someone who is awake and not aware just really resembles a zombie to me, and that is what I see in the majority of the population already. They may be awake, but they're not aware. Awareness is growing, though. So the potential exists. The question is it too late? I don't know. I guess history will have to be our judge. I would be proud to be part of that vanguard. But it is an open question, to be honest with you, and a very good one. So thank you for asking that question, because it is one that I ask myself almost on a daily basis.
Thanks for that, Chuck. And I see the first hour has just whizzed by, so I'd just like to update the listeners on tonight's schedule, because I've got some great news for everyone. Just got a message from Doc Rock, and he's got his uplink, got his guests, and got his power. So tonight, when we finish this show at 9 o'clock, it'll be over to Dr. Rock for Dr. Rock's radio show. But tonight it will be conversation live from this year's Conscious Tribal Gathering, a weekend spent just outside Glyndifrydwy. Sorry for the pronunciation, in the valley of the River Dee, connecting with like-minded souls and exploring the inner and outer spaces of our human experience and beyond. Included in this year is Critical Mass radio host Ben Emlyn. Well, Critical Mass, I don't think that's any longer, but I know Ben used to be with them. But Ben's a great friend of this show. Ben Emlyn Jones on Disclosure, Zombies and Black Goo. Synchro on Pilgrimage, Labyrinths and Walking the Path. Dr. Rock on consent, Jay Matthews on ufology, truth and lies, Louise Somerville Williams on extreme energy, and Audrey Davis offering consciousness contact with our ET star families, and of course a whole host of interesting folk who've come along to listen and take part. So that'll be along at 9 o'clock. In the meantime, we're going to take a short music break, and we'll be back in just over 1.5 minutes with tonight's guest, Chuck Ochelli. See you then.
Hi, everyone. This is Steve Smith with Pet Relief. We specialize in CBD and hemp health for our pet companions, and you are listening to Raconteur News.
And welcome back to Raconteurs News on Thursday evening. It's myself, Andy Young, and Tony Hurst, who's had to dip out at the moment because he's had to take a phone call. And we've got a voice who's becoming more familiar to our listeners by the day because we play one of his shows every evening, 5 to 7 p.m., which goes out at 1 a.m. up till 3 our time, so it's hopefully a more convenient time to listen. But welcome back, Chuck Ochelli.
Right, thank you, Andy. You know, and it's really great to be on with you guys. I was telling you during the break that it's wonderful to see people who actually care about the information, who are getting out the ideas and the news and everything, from a standpoint of honesty. So you guys fall into the category of honest media, as far as I'm concerned. And, even if we have our disagreements from time to time or whatever it is that may ever arise, although we don't seem to, fact is, I love Raconteurs News and absolutely respect everything you guys are doing over here. So it's really great to be on with you guys tonight.
I really appreciate that, Chuck. And as we went to the break, you were talking about how the possibility of Americans having the best chance to take this situation back. And I believe there's something you actually wanted to continue there because it's something that's playing on your mind.
Well, yeah, the truth is, Andy, that, all right, let's just break it down because your listeners can handle this, all right? Mm-hmm. The fact is that in my own country, I am considered a subversive. I'm on a list. I'm on many lists, in fact. Okay, the lists are growing because now if you go to public facilities, my own website is considered one of those places you're not allowed to go. It's in the category of pornography and salacious material and dangerous material that you can't publicly access in some places. Believe it or not, I had to see it with my own eyes. Now, there is the internet thing that's going on there. Of course, Google is striking back against many American journalists, commentators, talk show hosts, things like this. It's happening right now as we speak, by taking away our monetization, by messing with our analytics, by trying to bury the information that people like me bring out. Now, before I ever started doing a radio show, and I'm going to give this little anecdote here just to illustrate my point a little further. In 2007, I was preparing to get married for the second time, and I got a visit from the FBI. Now, there's a reason for that circumstance, which I won't go into. Well, you know what? I will go into it. What happened is there was a threat. I was going to get married on a naval vessel, and there was a threat against said naval vessel, which counts as an act of terrorism in the post-9/11 reality. Okay? And so the FBI became involved. Now, they paid a visit to mine and my fiance's home to explain to us that they would be present at the wedding, that they would be present at the dock, that they would be there along with a police presence, etc., in order to prevent any sort of incident from occurring. Now, you might think to yourselves, well, that's kind of a good thing. The government sort of protected you. But what they also did is pull my fiancée aside and explain to her that I was a subversive person, that I was, and she should know who she's marrying, that I was a type of person who made crazy allegations through media which I had published. And this is long before I landed on the internet making any pronouncements anywhere. But because I had participated in the writing of books, I've been an unnamed helper in the source, in source material, in books and things like this before, gathering interviews, et cetera, et cetera. And what it is that I was part of a contingent of people who had the nerve to believe that our own government participated in the assassination of our 35th president. Okay, that would be John F. Kennedy, for those of you who don't know. That I was a subversive person, that I had been with an FBI file since the age of 12, that I was a somewhat dangerous person in the government's mind. The FBI made it a point to explain that in 2007, and that was before I went on and made the comments that I do, have had the discussions that I've had, have revealed things like the phony drug war, et cetera, which now Google is attempting to penalize me for, and things like that. Okay, wonderful. Here's the deal. Some people have categorized me as anti-American. I am not anti-American. I am not anti-anything except the controllers, the oligarchy, okay, the fact that corporatist interests can, control too many aspects of our lives, the fact that people sell us poisons and convince us that it's food, the fact that people sell us poisons and convince us that it's medicines. I am against these things. This is what I am anti. The truth is that as an American citizen, and I need to say this, and I don't even like the word citizen, forget it, as someone who lives in the country formerly known as America, okay, in my mind, I simply would like to see the restoration of what I was told about as a child. I believed that I lived in a country where we were free to express ourselves. I believed that we lived in a country where we were in control of our government. I believed that we lived in a country where we were in control of our own destinies. I believed in the symbols. I believed in all these things, but then again, children do believe in many fairy tales. So I'm not saying that I was correct when I believed in those things, but I'm going to tell you right now that I want that. I want exactly what I was told, and I'm not going to shut up, and I'm not going to lay down. I'm not going to give in until that is restored for the sake of my children, for the sake of their children, for the sake of your children. This is the reality that I'm bringing forth, and this is why I do what I do. I know sometimes I make jokes. I know sometimes it sounds like I have prepared speeches. I don't. Every single thing comes right straight from my heart and my head as best I can represent it. And there may be a stylistic thing here where, it sounds quite American and it sounds like I'm whipping up sentiments here. But truth is, I'm simply speaking for myself. When I make these kind of pronouncements, I bring information forward, which is almost never about me or about the things in my life. I bring the relevant reality to people so that they can begin to contend with it. And I don't believe in lying to anybody. So that's what it's about. I am not anti-American. I am anti-American government at this point because it has been hijacked. It has been taken away from us. And again, I had this understanding that we, the people, were actually the supreme rulers of this land, that we were the rulers of our own destiny, that we had codified by our Constitution, that we had the right by virtue of our creation. Don't care who you think your creator was. I don't care if you think that there is no ethereal creator in any way, shape, or form, and you just imagine that it comes down to only the biology of your parents bringing you to fruition on this planet. By virtue of your creation, you have the right to your destiny of your choosing. That's not an American thing. That's a human thing. But I thought that in this country, that was to be protected. And again, those who would say that I don't have a right to say some of the things that I do, or that I should be suppressed for one reason or another, or that others should be suppressed for what it is, they believe, they see, so long as they adhere to the idea that they first do no harm, okay, to others. And again, harm is not defending yourself. Let's not forget that, when I talk about an anti-violence standpoint, when I talk about a peaceful resistance standpoint, some people say, well, then you don't believe that people have a right to defend themselves. Well, I very much look to a guy like Malcolm X, who basically told us that defending yourself is not violence. I'm paraphrasing, but I guarantee you can find that sentiment throughout his statements. And of course, he was another one who had to catch a bullet for making statements that might have changed what was going on in the population at the time. As did John F. Kennedy, as did Martin Luther King Jr., as did Medgar Evers, and the list goes on and on. The reality is that that we do need to change things, and I want what I was told existed when I was a child. That is all there is to it. I'm not anti-American, but I am not in league with the government as it stands. That's the clarity I wanted to give to that whole comment at the end of the first hour.
Well, you sound like a true American to me. I don't know why anyone would have any problem with any of the things you said. You've got a phony government there, and you don't like that, and you don't like the fraud that's going on against the people. So that would sum up all what you said for me, just like that, really. You're against all the things that we should all be against, but only the trouble is there's a lot of people that don't actually realise they're them problems, and they're still believing the mainstream crap, and then they can kind of look at people that are telling it the way it is with a different perspective, the wrong perspective often. But your problems coming from a long way back there with all sorts of nasty people that you really wouldn't want to get involved with, really. It's amazing what you've done for so many years as well. I know I've heard you talking about JFK quite a few times. I know I've heard you've been described many times as one of the top, if not the top man out there on the subject and that, and I find it all quite fascinating, and I find it as well, it's inspiring that you've gone on so long, and you'll work that hard in such circumstances as well to help bring the truth to people and bring back what should be there, what should never have been stolen from all of the American people. So 10 out of 10 to you.
Well, I do appreciate that. And that's something that I don't feel as though I never described myself as an expert. Other people have said that. I did a lot of work, and it was over 2 decades' time, again, long before I ever opened up a microphone. Because to be honest with you guys, I mean, I participated in other people's efforts for a while. I helped out others. I gave information to guys like James Corbett, to guys like Jack Blood. I gave information to them so that they could go out there and try and give the truth to people in the new age where there was the internet, and because remember, when I started looking at this stuff, I mean, I was physically going to the National Archives. I was physically going to libraries. I was physically going and meeting with people. There wasn't an internet for me to gather information on. But when I saw these guys speaking the truth, I wanted to help them, just like I helped authors, just like I helped people that were writing magazine articles, stuff like that. And I gave it for, no credit, most of the time, no pay. It was just about getting at the truth. And to be quite honest with you, when talking to some of these guys who I really do respect, a lot of them had said to me, why don't you do a radio show? And it was only a couple of years ago that I launched this, and to this point, I'm pretty satisfied about it. I mean, there's still a lot more to be done, but I think that I've done something a little different. I think that at all times, even though I may have made a mistake from time to time, I've been most honest about it, and I've done my best to bring something to people that I can't readily find in a lot of other places. So I thank you for recognizing that, and I do appreciate it. And meanwhile, here's the funny part about all of this. A lot of people don't know it, but I'm virtually blind. This is why they called me the blind JFK researcher, right? Because I have very little eyesight, and I struggled through, the reading, the examination, a lot of things with minimal eyesight. And I'm not crying to say, feel bad for me. I'm telling you that if I can make that effort with that handicap, and if I made that effort before I had the world's information and communication at my fingertips, there is no reason in the world why anybody cannot do the same thing regarding any issue that matters to them, that speaks to them. And truthfully, it was a personal situation that was the catalyst for me to get involved in research and all that to begin with. And it was because my father, who had served in Vietnam, had returned home, and as like many other Vietnam vets, was not taken care of. The official explanation is that he took his life a few years later. And when I turned to my government to try and obtain some assistance, actually, which would be normal for a handicapped child of a war veteran to go to school, because I thought that was going to be the way, the path to a better life, right? You go to college, you get yourself an education, and then you'll get a better job and you'll live a better life, and all of that before I realized that the American daydream is really a fiction. When I was trying to do that, my government came back to me and told me that they might even prosecute me for making an assertion that he had ever served in the military. And it was well over 20 years later that through some research, which I'm definitely going to credit to somebody when I do a presentation on this, which is coming very soon as I resolve that issue as well. It took all the way to 2007, a man who died in 1976. It took until 2007 for there to be proof in that the government has to acknowledge that this man even served. Now, you don't know my father's name, you don't know his history, but think about this. If one man can be ignored and buried and absolutely without acknowledgement for having sacrificed for his country, okay, what does that tell you about all of the rest of the bodies who have come back? What does that tell you about, the care of the system that perpetuates warfare and things like this as well? So this was the catalyst for me to turn around and say, you know what, my government's lying to me, the media's lying to me, and that's the reality here. That's what did it. But, hey, you know what? Again, you never know exactly what happens when you start a fire. They often get out of control. And starting brush fires in the minds of men is something that I encourage, and I know you guys do too. And hopefully I've given you guys a couple things to think about here. Again, speaking from a personal level, which I don't get to do on my own show. So I appreciate you guys indulging me tonight, Andy and Tony. But
it's really good hearing about you, Chuck. I'm finding it fascinating as stuff that I've not heard before. So it's an interesting thing to hear how a man gets to be who he is, or bits of it anyway. And again, my hat's right off to you for keep going with it as long as what you have. We've got a lot of people happy in the chat tonight. Sorry I'm not typing in there. A few have joined since I last said that. I can't type while my mic's open. And it's nice to see you all in there enjoying the chat. We've got I've got a question that's not personal. It's one that a few of us would probably like to know is, who do you think has been selected for the selection over your side of the water?
Well, I have been able to predict every presidential selection pretty much since I started paying attention, which, let's see now, if I take it back far enough, I guess I saw Reagan coming the first time when I was a kid again. I didn't see Gerald Ford coming. Nobody did. And I was too young to really care about the selection of Jimmy Carter. But ever since Reagan took office in after the 1980 election, I've been able to predict that relatively well. Immediately when they presented us with our options, keep that in mind, when they presented us with our options, and not just when they gave us the two options, but when they gave us the more far-flung field, when there was a larger contingent of individuals allegedly contending for that spot, I was able to predict every time who the winner was. Quite honestly, this year is a little different. It's gotten to be a whole lot more of a reality show. It's quite a bit more delusional than it ever was. Really, the emperor is being shown to have absolutely no clothes on if you're paying attention. Okay, because we have the reality show on the one alleged side of the paradigm, which is the Trumpster there. All right, this guy who has now somehow, by osmosis, granted his entire family political capital. Okay, the discussion of possibly Donald Trump Jr. running for mayor in New York, which would be an interesting situation. Even his daughter now being presented as someone who may have a political future in this country, et cetera, when nobody remembers that this guy was nothing more than a criminal crony capitalist in this country who happened to have a brand name. Okay, that's all he really is. But hey, let's not focus just on that. We have the war criminal on the other side, who has been part of the Clinton-Bush crime dynasty, which now, in my estimation, has been in control since, 1980. Because this guy was the puppet master behind Reagan, had an administration of his own, brought in a family friend called Clinton for a little while, and then turned it over to Sonny Boy for 8 years as well. And then they gave it to another family friend, possibly cousin, named Obama. And meanwhile, it looks like that may continue to prevail. I honestly have a hard time guessing. If you made me have to make a choice here, I almost think we may have a Clinton presidency once again. I don't feel confident, and I wouldn't want to bet anything of value on it because it's a very bizarre situation.
Yeah.
And really very unpredictable. We could not have imagined this 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
The only bit of it, I mean, I don't follow it like you do, obviously, but I like to try and simplify things for myself as much as possible. And when I look at that FBI business, I think, well, if they didn't want Clinton there, those that pull the strings, then they would have dealt with it then, surely. Or is it possible that there's a split going on right at the top of everything, right beyond the stage of politics? Is there some sort of split going on over there? Because it does seem to be a bit of a weird one. You normally, like you say, it's normally quite obvious who's going to get in that seat, but this time it's like you say, it's a little bit less obvious, but I would have thought they had the perfect opportunity to deal with Hillary and didn't.
See, you would have thought that, but then again, here's the counter argument to that, Tony, and it's a very good argument you make right there. But here's the counter. They can also just allow her to be dirtied up enough so that she is now handicapped and not able to win the race as far as the public is concerned. I mean, the truth is the vote count doesn't really matter. The fact that they were offering money for people to fill seats at the Democratic National Convention, because I still defy someone to find me an individual who is really amped up and happy about the Clinton candidacy in this country. I can't find a single person who is, enthusiastically supporting Hillary anywhere. You can find real Trump supporters who have been fooled into believing that that's a good thing. But I talk to people all over this country, and I don't know anybody who's a Hillary supporter. It's weird. And again, we did catch them offering $50 for people to sit in a seat for a day at the Democratic National Convention just this week. But hey, what's a little stagecraft and seat fillers among award shows and Friends and TV shows, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, I get it. What's that question, Kevin Mark? What's happening with the lies Hillary is saying about the emails? Because there was obviously, like this is related to what we were just saying about the FBI, but there was other people saying that it was going to get taken further last time I heard a week or two ago. So can you give us an update on whether there's likely to be any further proceedings or anything on that?
Well, what I find amazing is this, Tony, is now when you do an internet search and you try and find out about Hillary and emails, you now have a convolution of what you might find. Because we have the Democratic National Committee right on time, having an email dump, right, supposedly through the hackers, making a bit of controversy about what may or may not have happened regarding the Sanders campaign. Okay. So which emails are we talking about? That's the big question. Now, if you go and do a search and you try and dig in onto it, what are you going to find? You're going to find both things, and you're going to get yourself lost on a rabbit trail. The fact is that the FBI effectively knew that they could have gone after her for the other email scandal, the original email scandal, so to speak here, and did not. Now, is that an effort to simply dirty her up enough so that in the mind of the American public, that is the cause by which she could be disqualified from being president, and we have a Trump presidency, which, by the way, the moment that happens, again, even though I'm not feeling particularly proud as an American, that will definitely not help out my cause there. But it's a lose-lose situation. It's the war criminal, or it's the egomaniacal criminal, one or the other. This is your choices. Which criminal do you like?
Kev's interested in the 4 Americans who lost their lives in the Benghazi attack. Those emails.
Oh yeah, that's the thing though, right? Benghazi, again, here's what's fascinating to me is that nobody wants to address the fact that the State Department, being in bed with the CIA as per usual, all right, as per usual, our intelligence agencies and all their misadventures in these foreign lands, is really what led to what happened there. Is Hillary in control of the CIA? I don't believe so. Okay, so in my mind, this is, again, another distraction. Do people lose their lives in these events? They always do. You know, the cost of blood being involved in any of the intelligence operations, well, hey, that's just one of those things that comes right along with it. You know, when you go to McDonald's, you get fries. It's just what happens. Unfortunately, people do lose their lives constantly because of these, fun and game events in the Middle East and elsewhere. And I'll tell you what I find even more fascinating than what she might have emailed or anything else. The fact that rather quietly at this point, the alleged ISIS crisis people are making their way to Libya. Now take a look at a world map for a moment. Why are they making it from Syria to Libya? Doesn't that seem as though there would have to be a way of transportation already in place for them to be able to utilize? I mean, for them to get over there so covertly, so easily in mass numbers? You know what? There is. Why? Because before Gaddafi was deposed, there was weaponry coming out of Libya into Syria. That rat line existed, and Seymour Hersh, who, I got my criticisms for him, had it right when he described this. But he only described it running in one direction. Now that very same rat line of transportation is being utilized to funnel yet more weapons, more supplies, more everything into our alleged enemies' hands. And here we are back on the alleged war on alleged terror once again, which is truly the war of terror. But anyway, to me, the Hillary connection to Benghazi, it's yet another smokescreen. It's yet another weapon of mass distraction meant to keep people busy while we don't examine the true crimes of the individuals who are really murdering a lot more than 4 people on a daily basis globally.
Yeah. Do you want to read that out? Kev's responses to that, Andy?
He said Comey cleared her under instruction on July 28th, and he said all over a YouTube video she was caught out. I mean, I watched that Congress special hearing, and one or two of the guys who were questioning Comey absolutely left us with no doubt that Hillary had committed treason, but Comey kind of swerved it on the pretense that it was all about intent, when the crime that she actually committed, there is no requirement for intent, is there?
No, that's the bottom line is, and here's the thing. Newsflash, right? The political elites get away with criminal activity. Okay. I'm not hearing a lot of shock.
That sounded a bit like English, cynical humour there. That did. Nice one. Yeah. We know what you mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciated. Let me put it to you this way: when it comes to the English sensibility, I love the fact that the Sex Pistols, took a boat and went down. What was it? The river there and played "God Save the Queen," right? So I love that kind of stuff myself. And every once in a while, you hear that on my show too. I'll do that, but you can't help it. You can't help it. Oh, big headline. The murderer actually killed someone. A big headline, the criminal committed a crime. Big headline, somebody who continues to get away with things and has gotten away with things, and her husband who's gotten away with things, and who absolutely has been nothing but paid money by other criminals to make sure that they can continue to get away with things, including Mr. Trump, who was a Clinton supporter at one point. Don't forget that, folks. Somebody who's supposed to be the alleged adversary to the Bushes, really working in collusion with them, coincidentally, being part of the construct there while her husband was governor of Arkansas. And gee, wasn't that a wonderful, friendly place for all sorts of cocaine importation into this country? Wait a minute, was it the drug cartels, or was it the CIA, or was it both? Come on. If you're surprised that the criminal gets to walk away, okay, if you're surprised that process is rigged, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. I mean, the courts are rigged, the government is rigged, and the courts and the government are two different things, by the way, in this country. But anyway, if you don't understand that the whole thing is rigged, and look, justice is for sale to those who A, have enough money, and B, have the connections to execute, that's really the truth of it, So this is no big shocker to me. I realize, and I watched that questioning too, by the way, guys. It was astounding to me, but only because I have this crazy idea in my mind that when people do criminal things, they were often punished. But that's not the truth of it. That's not why our prisons exist. That's not why the for-profit criminal industry and the for-profit prison industry exist in this country. It's not for people like Hitler. It's for people like you and me who get caught up because we can't afford to buy our way out. We don't have the clout, we don't have the cash, and we don't have the connections. So it's not the complexion for the connection any longer. It's simply the connection itself and what it is you can put on your Visa, MasterCard, American Express, et cetera, that's what it's all about. And look, how do we have to show you the Clinton not non-for-profit Clinton Foundation? How do we have to show you how people represent themselves as trying to do charitable things or trying to do something positive for the world, but meanwhile making sure that small to massive fortunes are made for themselves and every member of their family? Wait a minute, this sounds a lot like ancient history, doesn't it? But it's real time, and it's the American empire of today. So, no shocker to me, guys.
Yeah, no shocker to me either. It's a wonder they don't come out and publicly say, like they did with the banks in 2008 or whatever, after they'd finished investigating all the fraud and corruption that had gone on there that caused the latest crash that we still ain't over. But they actually come out and publicly said that they're too big to prosecute. We can't do it. It's a wonder they're not doing that with the Clintons and saving all the drama and the expense of these televised whatever it is that she went to, hearing, I think it was. It's why bother? Because it's that in your face now that you might as well not bother going through that expense, might you?
One thing you got to give to Trump is at this point, there's no reason to be polite about it. As far as the elites are concerned, and this guy proved it. In years past, he would have been disqualified as someone that we would not have even been able to tolerate as an irrational and irresponsible spokesperson for this country. But there's a significant number of the population that have grown to a point where they understand that a lot of it is BS, but they think somehow that this guy is going to be the answer, when they don't realize that he's part of the very same system that is the BS that they were worried about in the first place. I mean, And that's the fact. They run us around in a circle. It's very much like what some people do to dogs when they put a stake in the ground and put a chain there. Yeah, the dog seems to be running around and having a good old time, but the truth is the chain only goes so far. And that's the reality of our selection process. That's the reality of our legal system. So long as you are not in that radius of the dog on the chain, by the way, which all of us are, that don't have the power, don't have the money, and yet we're the ones who are supposed to count the most. Everything on its head. That's just the way it goes. And it has gotten a lot more blatant. And you got to say that that's one thing there that you definitely get entertained by the fact that a guy like Trump can make irrational and inflammatory statements and be considered for the alleged post of being the leader of the free world, they used to call it. Remember that? This guy, with his reality show and his nonsense and his convoluted, continuously contradictory statements, et cetera, et cetera. This guy is actually probably the perfect representative for all those who are fool enough to believe that the system is working for them instead of working to consume them.
Thanks for that, Chuck. We've got an interesting point has been raised there in the chat room. I'd like to thank all the contributors in chat tonight. You've put some great stuff in there. And it's from Tanzanite, a new face in the chat room. I think I've seen the name there once before. And it says in 1918, 25,000 American volunteers joined the American Protective League to root out German spies during World War One. They found that they could gain access to any house on the grounds of checking their gas and electric service. A key element in the efficacy of surveillance is the accuracy of the methods used. That's news to me, Chuck. Did you know about that?
I don't recall exactly this. I've got to tell you that kind of methodology has been used before. The interesting part about the surveillance state is that it is not brand new. The technologies are seemingly brand new, but this is it sounds correct. I've got to tell you. And I do know that this happened during World War II. I didn't know about World War I. That's something new for me to look at, quite honestly. During World War II, we utilized, I say again, and I shouldn't say that, but here we go, old habits die hard. The American government utilized so many different, conduits, let's call it, in order to prosecute that war from our alleged side of it. That you find that the original deals being made with, organized crime figures, allegedly independent businesses that had customer information. The fact that American Express, which I mentioned earlier, actually came into being as a pay system for the for the intelligence agencies. A lot of people don't know that. All these different methods of surveillance have evolved over time. And there was a point at which I do know that utility companies were utilized. I just first heard about that in World War II era examinations. I did not know that it was World War I. But you know what? Every time I dig into one of these things, I do discover something new. So it could be that whoever that is in your chat room is just ahead of me on this.
Yeah,
a link's been posted to the resource anyway. I'll get it over to you, Chuck, and check it out.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to see that. So, thank you.
I know you said earlier on you'd love to have a chat with Dr. Rock sometime, and while we were on air, I messaged the doc. I'm not sure whether he's actually listening at the moment, but he said he'd really look forward to that because, much like yourself, he enjoys sitting in the passenger seat.
That would be a lot of fun. And no, definitely, Dr. Rock is an interesting guy. And I love to bring interesting and honest people onto my show. That's for sure. So, I don't know if I said it on air, but I'll say it now. I'd love to have him as a guest. It's not just all famous people and, professors and authors and whatever else always on my show. I love people that are just honest, interesting, and Dr. Rock is definitely one of those guys. So I would be extremely happy and honored to have him as a guest on my show one night. So if we can make that happen, I'd love it.
Yeah, we'll certainly make that happen. No worries about that at all, Chuck. We're coming towards the end of the show, and I'll remind everyone, Doc Rock's along in just 10 minutes' time. So have you got anything else you'd just like to cover in the last few minutes, Chuck?
The only thing I can say is this. Let's... Okay, I got a lot of things on my mind at all times, guys, so try and bear with me. I've said what I've had to say about the acts of kindness, that's for sure, and that's something that I'm constantly repeating. So please excuse me for that. But also let me say that, if you appreciate the fact that there are people that are in support of you getting honest and real information, it's incumbent upon you to support them as well. So I would say that in any way that you can support Raconteurs News, obviously I'm always happy to have support as well. I have a website, Ochelli.com. You can go there, tell a friend about it, tell a friend about the Ochelli Effect, which is my radio show. But that's not what I'm here to say. If you can support Raconteurs News, the work of great people like Andy Young, like Tony Hurst, okay, like all the guys that I'm very sure were very carefully chosen to come onto this network, it is incumbent upon you as a listener to support them, okay, in every way that you can. Of course, dollars and, pounds or euros or God knows whatever else people are using around the world are appreciated, but also spreading the word, sharing it among others. Things like this are absolutely necessary to keeping us all afloat. So I want to say that first is that, support the media that supports your right to know the reality. That's the first thing. And secondly, again, I want to thank you guys. At my website, by the way, I did something a little strange. I put a video up there. I don't often show up on video because I really am not comfortable being on camera, but what are you going to do? I did that. And so you guys can get a look at that over at Ochelli.com, which is spelled OCHELLI.com. The podcast is there. It's free. There's a lot of free stuff there. The video section itself right now is completely free. Like I said, there's plenty of stuff to do over there. And my show is on American Freedom Radio. That's where it originates. But I'm extremely proud to be on Raconteurs News and to be part of the lineup here, because it's good to me to be among people who are like-minded and who are good people in general. So I thank you guys again for having me as a guest, and especially thank you, and I'm very humbled that you guys have added me to the lineup over here. So I just wanted to say that one more time.
We're absolutely honoured to have you as part of the team, Chuck. You put some absolutely fabulous content out there. I know you do 5 shows a week, so it's quite a lot of logistics involved getting your guests lined up there. Have you got anyone who particularly shines out? Are you looking forward to interviewing in the next few days?
Well, in the past few days or in the next few days?
In the next few days.
Let's see now. Well, there's a lot of people that are tentatively possible. And I don't like to announce them too far in advance, because all of a sudden people decide to sabotage certain people that are supposed to show up on my show, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. But I would say take a look at the recent podcasts to give you an idea that I go all over the map. I love having Roger Landry and JP Sotilli on my Tuesday night shows. They're really incredible bookends. Roger from the Liberty Beacon, JP from newsvandal.com, which is an amazing news aggregation weapon for those who wish to engage in the psychological warfare that is out there in the media. I have a lot of people on. Tonight I'll have Frank Gregory Ford on again to discuss a different issue than I had him on for recently, of course. Geez, everybody. Aphrodite Jones has been interesting recently. The guitarist Oz Fox from Stryper, the band, that's been interesting recently. Rebecca Gordon on war crimes. Joseph Hickman on the burn pit syndrome. For the actual damages being done in Iraq. A show that I'm particularly proud of, and I hope people look for, was with original Black Panther Larry Pinkney, and I do mean original Black Panther. Don't necessarily believe the hype regarding the legend of these people. They were actually some very good people that were looking to protect their community and their reality, and were all about human rights. It wasn't just about black rights, although they were, founded with the idea that black rights needed to be protected first. But I'm proud of all the stuff that I've done, and I keep trying to bring new and better information as I go. Just kind of stay tuned and see if something catches your eye, and I will keep doing my best to bring it to you.
That's great, Chuck. And we'll keep putting your shows out at 5 p.m. UK time on raconteursnews.com. If you just go to the live chat room page, you'll find it there. It'll start playing at 5 p.m. automatically our time. So I'd like to say a huge thank you, Chuck. It's always great to speak to you, and look forward to speaking to you again sometime soon in the near future. Best wishes with American Freedom Radio. I know you're going through some tough times at the minute, and I hope you get the backing that you certainly deserve. You've got some great hosts on there. I've been speaking to one or two of them off air since we last spoke, and really looking forward to seeing you getting things in good shape there. So I'd like to say a big thank you to Tony as well. Thanks very much, Tony, mate. And thank you to everyone for listening, because I always say, if it wasn't for you, we'd be just talking to ourselves. Okay, have you got anything you'd like to say before we go, Tony? Oh, it seems like Tony's disappeared somewhere. So, Chuck, thanks again for joining us tonight, mate, and look forward to hearing from you in the very near future. Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Good night, and stay tuned for Dr. Rock. And if the show doesn't start automatically after ours, then please refresh the page and it will come up then. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers, Chuck.
Thanks, and good night.